I'm sorry, did I take the name? I don't know who was first, second, or third, so you guys care?
Doesn't matter.
Does anybody care?
I'm gonna make it quick.
Now, Robert, before you start, if you remember the last time, I mentioned to you that we're going to be reporting back to you on a couple of items that I just thought we needed to report back on. So I hope John Ellsworth. I asked John, and I think I took up a lot of his work, to once and for all get to the bottom of some of the questions that you've been raising relative to the topics that I've asked John to research. So,
Would you like me to sit down?
yeah, you know what, you can sit like the first
You know what,
row.
I'm sorry, but this has been a very long meeting, and I'm kind of pressed for time. And I was going to say that in lieu of how late the meeting was going, I was going to suggest that there's a few topics that we, like you said, you were going to get back to me on, and I'd like to table it to the next meeting. I just want to make this statement, I'm going to move on. Okay?
I think though, I don't...
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be argumentative with you. I came up here and I waited all night to speak, to make a statement. I just want to make it. And then everything else that we spoke about, if it's okay with you, I'll let the other people speak. We'll table it for the next meeting.
No, I don't know that we can do that, Robert. You've asked the questions, I told you I'd report back tonight. This gentleman spent the whole week
Me too.
time to get answers. I didn't say you didn't, and I would appreciate if you didn't interrupt me.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So, John, you're
Well, I'll sit down, and when he's ready, you can go.
Thank you.
The focus here are posts by Mr. Robert Ripp, which we believe are in violation of item number 3.10 in Facebook's Statement of Rights and Responsibilities. Which directs users that, quote, "you will not use Facebook to do anything unlawful, misleading, malicious, or discriminatory." Emphasis added, specifically pertaining to 3 topics which have been the subject of his recent attention: the farm at Oyster Bay, John Burns Park, and the Saset Park application. We'll start with the farm at Oyster Bay, the Lit Tower estate. Relevant pages on this topic from Mr. Ripp's Facebook posts are contained in Exhibit B. The following are some statements made by Mr. Ripp, directly by Mr. Ripp, not by anybody else who jumped on his Facebook page, on the topic of the federal grant relating to the farm at Oyster Bay. And these are quotes. On February 28th, after 6 years, none of the work, the federal grant, was earmarked for seems to have been done. Also on the 28th, I have a funny feeling they absconded with the federal grant monies. Also on the 28th of February, the town got this grant in 2010, and the barn is nowhere near as completed as described. Also on the 28th, the proper authorities should be notified of this questionable use of federal grant funds. Again on the 28th, you can see the barn quite clearly in the accompanying photograph. Doesn't look like they spent 2.2 mil on lighting to me. Again on the 28th, how much of the federal grant money did they funnel to Big Joe? On March 1st, the interesting thing is the building and the property are not even listed on the National or State Historic Register and are currently not eligible to register. Also on March 1st, IMO, in my opinion, the reason the Lit Towers estate is not a landmark or a registered historical building is because if it were, there would be other outside people involved in the decisions and operations. As demonstrated below, there is no evidence in the relevant documents to substantiate the foregoing claims by Mr. Ripp, and accordingly, these and any similar items should be removed as being in violation of Facebook's policies against posting misleading information. Mr. Ripp's accusations persist even after he received from the Department of Energy, the DOE, the very documents which demonstrate that the federal funds, which originally were targeted toward a project at the farm, were properly transferred to street lighting upgrades with DOE approval. Here are the pertinent facts about the federal grant. In 2010, DOE awarded the town a $2.2, I'm rounding off, million grant to implement energy-efficient improvements to the barn complex at the farm, including a geothermal radiant heating/cooling system, photovoltaic panels, and improvements to the building envelope. Douglas A. Wilkie, architect and engineer, I'll call him Wilkie for the rest of the presentation, was retained by the town through a competitive procurement process to undertake the project design. A standard provision of these types of federal grants requires that the work at any facility listed or eligible to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places must be approved by the New York State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO. SHPO had determined that the Littauer estate and the barn are eligible for a National Register listing as set forth in their letter to the town dated April 11, 2011. Exhibit C. And these are documents that Mr. Rip has in his possession. In compliance with the foregoing requirement, preliminary design plans prepared by Wilkie were submitted to SHPO in November 2010. In response to a request for additional information, Wilkie made a follow-up to submission to SHPO in February 2011. SHPO's April 11, 2011 letter, which is Exhibit C, indicated that there are significant historic preservation issues related to the proposed work, and that construction of the project, as proposed at that time, could not be approved and was not eligible for grant funding, but that the project could be redesigned and resubmitted for SHPO review. That information is in that letter. After determining that the energy-efficient improvement project at the farm could not be readily modified to receive SHPO approval, in August 2011, the town requested that DOE allow the remainder of the grant award to be used for a program of replacing existing high-pressure sodium streetlights with energy-efficient LED lighting on select main roads throughout the town. This request was approved by the Department of Energy in a letter dated August 31st, 2011. Exhibit D, again, a document that Mr. Rip had in his possession. The street lighting upgrade work was completed in August 2013. The Department of Energy approved all of the costs associated with the work summarized above, including $266,000 for Wilkie's design work for the original proposal to install energy-efficient improvements at the farm, and approximately $1.9 million for the installation of upgraded street lighting under the amended approval by the Department of Energy. All costs were properly accounted for to the DOE's satisfaction. The DOE would not have issued payment to the town if the town didn't provide the proper documentation, and if the work was not reviewed and approved by the Department of Energy. The following are some statements made by Mr. Rip on his Facebook page on other topics pertaining to the farm in Oyster Bay. As demonstrated below, there is no evidence to support Mr. Rip's assertions, and accordingly, these and any similar items should be removed as being in violation of Facebook's policy against posting misleading information. On February 28th, the farm is federally funded. Fact is that, as discussed previously, the farm received a federal grant for a proposed energy-efficient improvement project. However, these monies were transferred with federal approval to a street lighting replacement project. No other aspect of the farm received federal funding. Also on 2/28, he said, only the chosen few get to attend. The fact is that the farm is open to the public. However, it's not available for people to walk in off the street. This restriction is necessary for a number of reasons, including safety concerns. There are open ponds on the property, and the buildings formerly were part of an historic residential estate which do not lend themselves to unrestricted access. and because the property is surrounded by residential neighbors. Therefore, it is necessary to closely control access. To ensure that any intended uses or activities are compatible with these constraints, anyone seeking access to the site need only ask by submitting a letter to the town on organizational letterhead if it's a group, specifying the requested date and nature of the activity and providing evidence of necessary insurance coverage. This is the procedure that applies to group activities at any of the town's parks, not special to the Littauer Estate. Mr. Ripp has directly inquired about conducting an outing at the site and was provided with this information, but he has not followed through with his written request. Although the level of activity at the farm is less intense than most other town parks, the public has used and continues to use the site. Access is not restricted to the chosen few. This has included Boy Scout and Girl Scout groups, church and temple groups, other community groups, Tai Chi, art, and yoga classes, just to name a few. On March 1st, the quote, they got 58 mil in New York State grant tax money to buy the place. The fact is, the money for the town's acquisition of the Littauer Estate were entirely from the Save Environmental Assets C-Fund bond.
You say 58 mil or 5 point?
I think he forgot a decimal point. No federal funds were used by the town in this land purchase. The purchase price was $5,728,882.93, not $58 million. Next one, on March 17th, Town Attorney John Ellsworth was the author of the misleading seeker report. He prepared the scam of a report. He also refers to the document in question as phony report, and to me as a member of the town ethics board. I'm neither on the town attorney's staff, nor am I a member of the ethics board, for starters. The seeker report to which Mr. Rep points to was prepared in June of 2006, at a time when the town was pursuing acquisition of a 8.6 acre parcel comprising the undeveloped northerly portion of the site, the 25.3 acre Littauer Estate. At that time, the Littauer family had intended to retain the 14.7 acre southerly parcel containing the house, the barn, and other structures. After further negotiations, the family agreed to sell to the town, and the town agreed to purchase the entire 25 acre estate. With the change of scope of the proposed action, an updated seeker report was prepared, dated April 25, 2007, which addressed acquisition of the full 25.3 acres. Exhibit E. It appears that the documents provided to Mr. Ripp by the town clerk's office did not include the April 2007 report. However, it is clear from the town board's resolution number 555-2007, adopted on July 10, 2007, Exhibit F, that it was not based on the report that Mr. Ripp had in his possession, because the language was completely different. The updated report specifically discusses conclusions pertaining to the environmental review of the 25.3 acre property. And in fact, that report almost is word for what was incorporated into the town board's resolution on the matter. The next topic is John Burns Park, the synthetic turf fields in the northwest corner.
But John, just stop at that point. Just in a simple statement. At Littauer, the real thrust of what you said is that the town obtained a roughly $2.2 million grant, which after some expenses for the cost of obtaining the grant apparently paid to Wilkie, I think it was?
Yes.
The money was, I'll use the word, for lack of a better word, transferred with the permission of the federal government who made the grant to be used for the town wildlife. In a nutshell, that's
correct.
What happened with the $2.2 million.
Yes. The following are some statements made by Mr. Ripp on his Facebook page on this topic, John Burns Park, Northwest Synthetic Turf Fields, Exhibit G. As demonstrated below, there is no evidence to support Mr. Ripp's assertions, and accordingly, these and any similar items should be removed as being in violation of Facebook's policy against posting misleading information. On February 20th, how do we know it was contaminated? Why didn't they continue to test the area before actually starting construction and releasing the contaminants into the atmosphere? Same day. Think the company doing the work might have gotten an extra 1.5 mil to haul away plain dirt? March 7th. I also was told the whole spill, quote, and contaminated material, quote, cleanups were scams and no work was actually done. March 11th. Isn't it strange that, again, quote, contaminated material was non-hazardous? March 12th, Nelson and Pope only reported a smell of diesel fumes to the DEC. They never reported any of the obvious hazardous waste they claimed was the cause of the majority of the change order. Again on March 12th, the bottom line is there was never any contaminated construction material, again in quotes, at all. March 20th, Nelson and Pope reported to the town the discovery of all this hazardous material. Same day. There are only two ways out. A, Nelson and Pope are guilty of arraigning, and that's what he actually wrote, to dump hazardous material as non-hazardous, or B, there was never any hazardous material as listed on Nelson and Pope's change order explanation report, and they are guilty of falsely inflating the cost of the contract. Also on March 20th, there never was any 1,800 tons of additional soil removed, or if it was just regular dirt, and the town and Nelson and Pope misrepresented it to the New York State Controller. It seems as it was reported as a spill to DEC and as contaminated material to the New York State Comp. Nelson and Pope failed to report the hazardous material it lists on its change order to the town, to the DEC, and had it dumped as regular dirt. Here are the facts about this particular matter. The contract work for this project entailed a single change order totaling approximately $1.5 million, of which approximately $1.2 million pertained to the removal of material from the site, which has been the primary focus of Mr. Ripp's commentary. The remaining amount of the change order was for items added for new facilities that were requested by the user groups. The material removal component of the change order included two discrete items. $920,000 for removal of unsuitable material. This material was construction debris, which it was believed was deposited on the site during the widening of Merrick Road. It was not contaminated, other than the fact that it was not suitable as a base for the new synthetic turf fields, in terms of stability and drainage characteristics, for example. The most precise method to determine the extent of unsuitable material during pre-construction investigation involves small excavations called test pits, using a backhoe throughout the area of suspected fill. However, this method was not feasible in this particular case because the excavation of test pits would require that the heavily used softball field and practice field be taken out of use. Therefore, Nelson and Pope, the town's engineering consultant for this project, performed a non-invasive ground-penetrating radar, GPR, survey of the project area. Based on the GPR results, the bid documents estimated that 50 cubic yards of concrete would have to be removed. There was no indication in the GPR survey that the remainder of the project area contained unsuitable fill. The mere presence of fill doesn't necessarily mean that it's unsuitable for construction. Once the fields were taken out of operation when the project commenced, test pits performed at that time revealed that a more extensive volume of fill material was present, which was not suitable as a base for the new fields. And a change order was negotiated with the contractor. Nelson and Pope signed off on this change order based on a unit price which was consistent with the current market price for such excavation. Even though test pits could not be excavated to investigate the characteristics of the underlying material while the fields were still in use before the project construction commenced, Nelson Pope did perform a series of 12 borings in the project area. Borings are small diameter holes which could be undertaken during off hours without interfering with the use of the fields. The number of borings installed, 12 in this case, was fairly large given the small, approximately 2-acre size of the project area. None of the borings indicated the presence of significant fill material that would be unsuitable as a base for the new synthetic turf fields. As indicated, the pre-construction investigations conducted by the town through Nelson and Pope, consisting of a GPR survey and borings, represented a reasonable and appropriate level of due diligence for the project, given the constraint that the test pits were not feasible. The second item of the change order was approximately $321,000 for the removal of petroleum contamination. This issue was not evident prior to the start of construction. The petroleum contamination was discovered while the project site was being excavated for the installation of subsurface drainage infrastructure for the new fields. The spill was properly reported to the DEC, who sent a representative to the site to confirm the presence of contamination. Nelson and Pope prepared a work plan for removal of the contamination, which was approved by the DEC before the remediation work commenced. On the one hand, Mr. Ripp has used terms like fake contaminated material and spill cleanups, and otherwise alleges that there was never any need to remove any soil from the park. On the other hand, however, he has also claimed that the contaminated soil was improperly removed and illegally disposed, even going so far as characterizing it as, quote, possible contaminated waste environmental crime in an email to the DEC on February 25th, and recently accusing Nelson and Pope, as I quoted previously, without any factual substantiation whatsoever, of criminal activity in the illegal disposal of hazardous material. It can't be both. They're mutually exclusive. Material that isn't contaminated or is fake, in Mr. Ripp's words, do not require special handling and cannot be improperly or illegally transported or disposed in the sense he asserts. Both of Mr. Ripp's diametrically opposed conjectures, that is, that the contamination was fake and that the material was improperly, illegally transported and disposed, are directly contradicted by his own acknowledgement that the spill was called into the DEC and was closed out by the DEC. The records filed with the DEC in connection with the spill demonstrate its authenticity. Spill closure by DEC is a regulatory sign-off, which by definition indicates that they received all the necessary documents to demonstrate A, that the contamination was satisfactorily removed, based on testing that showed the absence of contamination in the soil remaining in the area of excavation, and B, that the contaminated soil was properly transported and disposed, as set forth in manifest. It appears that Mr. Ripp's allegation regarding fake contamination may be based on a statement and a report issued by the New York State Controller in 2013, which will be discussed in more detail in a little while. That report applies the term contaminated to all of the material which was removed from the site under the change order. However, as discussed in detail, it was always clear, and it is expressly described in the documents in Mr. Ripp's possession, that two distinct types of material were removed and were included in the change order. First, the petroleum contaminated material, which was relatively small in volume and was the subject of the DEC spill. And second, the unsuitable fill material, which was of much larger volume and was not contaminated, as this term pertains to DEC's spill program, but still had to be removed and replaced with clean fill in order to provide the proper base for the new synthetic turf fields. There seems to be significant confusion in Mr. Ripp's Facebook postings regarding terminology on this topic. The term non-hazardous does not mean that petroleum-tainted soil was not contaminated. DEC has established specific criteria, Exhibit H, for determining whether any given petroleum spill is either A, hazardous, which triggers a requirement for special handling, transport, and disposal procedures, or B, is less contaminated and qualifies as non-hazardous, which is subject to less stringent requirements. None of the material removed from the project site was classified as hazardous under DEC criteria. Going on to some further quotes by Mr. Ripp on his Facebook page. On March 20th, shouldn't some of our trusty consultants have taken a look, made an inspection? Fact is that one of the town's consultants did do that. That was Nelson & Pope, who was the town's engineering consultant on this project, and was on the site on a continuous basis during construction, undertaking all inspections, including those with regard to the petroleum contamination. Additionally, as previously noted, the DEC inspected the site before approving the remedial action plan for the petroleum contamination, and that plan was prepared by Nelson & Pope before the spill cleanup commenced. On March 20th, they found anomalies in 5 different locations, yet instead of stopping there and following the procedures as they did in Bethpage, they just resumed construction and allowed a company that installs AstroTurf for a living to remove hazardous waste. As I described previously, there was no hazardous waste involved in the project at Burns Park. The 2 locations are very different. The construction area for the ice skating rink at Bethpage was known to have been used for disposal of hazardous chemicals, including solvents and PCBs, by Grumman Aerospace Corporation, which owned the parcel comprising Bethpage Community Park, before donating it to the town in 1969. Prior to commencing the cleanup, the town undertook extensive testing and entered into an order on consent with the DEC to undertake remediation, which is described in the report of 191 pages to which Mr. Ripp points. In contrast, there was no prior knowledge of contamination in the Northwest Field project area at Burns Park, and, as Mr. Ripp expressly acknowledges, this was a minor petroleum spill. Here's a series of his quotes regarding the New York State Controller's report. The Office of the Controller was kind enough to expose how the town manipulates its bid process and uses their inadequate change order process to dump money to their contractors. That's on February 20th. Also on February 20th, the town knowingly creates a fixed bidding process, and the town refuses to correct its behavior. IMO, in my opinion. That means the town is more interested in providing income for a select few than it is in protecting the interest of its residents. March 7th, for the life of me, I can't fathom how these people could orchestrate such a crime. March 7th, I don't believe the Office of the Controller realizes they're dealing with criminals. Same date, the town purposefully circumvents the change order procedure, and the New York State Controller called them on it. March 11th, I contacted the Office of the New York State Controller with my concerns regarding the town of Oyster Bay's blatant disregard for any bidding process or change order policy. March 20th, why did it take 6 months after this work was done to approve the change order? Facts. The 2013 report by the New York State Controller, referenced by Mr. Ripp, audited a period between January 1st, 2010 and October 31st, 2011. Included in that document was the town's written response to a preliminary version of the report, Exhibit I, pages 31 through 37. As well as the Controller's reply to the town's response, same exhibit, page 38. As indicated in these documents, the Controller accepted the town's response and had only minor further commentary in reply. The town's response identified measures that were already actually in place, of which the Controller was apparently unaware, as well as other measures that would be taken moving forward, and which have been implemented in the intervening years prior to when Mr. Ripp started his own investigation. And the matter was closed. Mr. Ripp's assertions regarding issues raised by the Controller's report are rehashing old news pertaining to issues that have already been resolved and are not relevant to the way the town currently processes change orders. February 24th. So the town reports to New York State they had to use a change order to increase the budget of a job from $300K to almost $3 million because they need to remove contaminated material. March 7th, the original price of the job was $300,000. Again, same date, the town accepted the bid and contracted for the project for the amount of $300,000. Mr. Ripp cites $300,000 as the original price of the job, whose main components included replacement of the grass softball field and practice field with synthetic turf. It appears that the source of this number may have been the 2013 New York State Controller's report, although it's not clear where they got that from. In any case, the project was never scoped for $300,000. Laser won a project-specific bid award at $1.2 million, a number which Mr. Ripp also cites without rectifying the discrepancy. March 7th, even though the town put the original job out on a different job that Laser won the bid on, they approved the increases in costs associated with the fake contaminated material and spill cleanup, in quotes, for Burns Park via a, quote, requirement contract they've had with Laser for decades. March 9th, they gave their pals extra work in a requirements contract scam. Same date, the town board never approved any change order resolutions for the spill, quote, and contaminated material, quote, because the town uses a scam where the extra funds are approved through a requirements contract. Facts. As previously discussed, all work for this project was performed under Laser's project-specific contract, which they were awarded as the lowest responsible bidder. The additional work associated with the removal of the petroleum spill and unsuitable material was performed under a negotiated change order. No requirements contract was ever used on this project. The town board approved the change order, contrary to what Mr. Ripp said, for this project by means of Resolution 290-2009 on April 7, 2009, Exhibit J. March 7th, I live right around the corner from the park, and there was never any park closure. Same date, the park was never closed. There would have been a pit 5 feet deep in the whole park area. March 20th, why wasn't the park closed to the public for safety's sake? Facts. The area of petroleum contamination, which was under DEC's direct oversight, was confined to a small portion of the Northwest Field project area. The unsuitable material extended throughout most of the construction area, but, as noted before, this consisted of construction debris, which was unsuitable as a base for new synthetic turf fields, but was not contaminated in the sense that applies to the DEC spill program. The entire project area was closed off to the public as an active construction site. Therefore, it was not necessary to close the park. March 7th, remarkably, the contaminated material, again in quotes, the removal of which cost us another 1.2 mil, was contaminated enough to warrant removal, but not contaminated enough to need any DEC permits. Facts. As Mr. Ripp acknowledges, the town did obtain a required permit from the DEC under the state's Tidal Wetland Program prior to the commencement of the project. However, none of the work to remove the petroleum contamination or the unsuitable on-site fill material required a DEC permit. As noted previously, the cleanup of the petroleum spill did occur under the direct oversight of the DEC, and the transport and disposal of the unsuitable material was governed by DEC solid waste regulations.
What does that mean, direct oversight?
They showed up to the site, they looked at the hole, they worked with Nelson and Pope to decide what needed to be done to clean it up, and they signed off on the project in the end.
So they were physically present?
They showed up at the site, they inspected the site. Site disposal. At that point, the groundwater was tested and found to meet applicable standards, which allowed its pumping into the county system. Now moving on to Saset Park. The following are some statements made by Mr. Ripp on his Facebook page on this topic, Exhibit K. As demonstrated below, there is no evidence to support Mr. Ripp's assertions, and accordingly, these and any similar items should be removed as being in violation of Facebook's policy against posting misleading information. On February 1st, you will soon see the real deal behind the whole zero wire, town dump, Saset Park, Genova's acquisition of the trail park, and all the people who have interest in the properties located between the proposed Saset Park and Genova's property, who also happen to be major donators to both Venditto's political clubs. You were right about...
What's that, both what?
Venditto's political clubs. You were right about one thing. This is a deal that's been planned and going on for a long time. Why do you think Johnny killed them all? The Zero Wire estate deal is just that, a deal to enrich the Vendido, Genova, and a list of political contributors with real estate interest in the area. Here are the facts. The Saset Park application pertains solely and specifically to the approximately 93 acres comprising the former Zero Wire site and the adjoining town of Oyster Bay Department of Public Works highway facility. No other properties are included in the application. If the Saset Park application is approved, no other properties would be covered under the requested plan unit development mixed-use zoning district. It wasn't Johnny killed them all, it was the residents of the town of Oyster Bay who killed them all, in an open public process which culminated in a referendum in August 2013. The vote in that referendum was by a 2-to-1 margin against them all, despite a hostile, multi-million-dollar media blitz by Taubman, the prospective mall developer. On March 14th, I was at the Saset Park meeting. This is all in caps, so he's yelling at us. I was at the Saset Park meeting where the developers lied to everyone in regards to the cap, that is just a sheet of plastic in most of the location. Here are the facts. The very report which Mr. Rip tells other people to look at to support his allegation, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's 5-year review report for Saset landfill, dated January 18, 2012, explicitly contradicts this assertion. The report at page 10, Exhibit L, specifies the capping system consists of 3 types of cap surface over a 60 mil high-density polyethylene HDPE geomembrane and gas venting layer. Specifically, the cap cover system contains the following layers from top to bottom. 24-inch barrier protection layer consisting of 2 inches of asphalt concrete top course, 5-inch asphalt concrete base course, 17-inch clean fill, or 6-inch recycled concrete, 8-inch clean fill, or 6-inch topsoil with a vegetative cover and 18 inches of clean fill. 60 mil HDPE geomembrane, 12-inch gas venting layer, and geotextile filter fabric. The 3 different surface covers will place over the cap for use in particular areas of the site based on the anticipated future site uses. The site was divided into 5 different facilities as shown in Figure 1, Saset landfill cover system. I don't think I got to read the rest of this. And that's it. So what we're requesting from Mr. Rip, and this is just a small sampling of the things on his Facebook page that are inaccurate. As Facebook policy dictates, we're requesting him to remove the erroneous information from his Facebook page. And barring that, if he doesn't respond, then we'll have to pursue other avenues.
Okay. I had given, I think I asked Matt, was it you, Matt?
It was.
Yeah, you know what, no, I think that's enough time. Let's hold off on the other topics. I got the message.